Look at the look in Joe's eye when he talks about Kate Bush. Wow. Oh my goodness. Smitten, totally bugging. Wow.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Listography. This week we are ranking the 9 studio albums of Kate Bush.
Joe's new girlfriend.
I wish.
So just to clarify quickly, she does have another album that's kind of considered a studio album called Director's Cut, which is like some re-recordings of tracks from Sensual World and The Red Shoes. We are not including that, but we're including all the other studio albums. Kind of also want to talk quickly before we get into our lists about sort of our familiarity with this artist. For me, this is the least I've known of an artist going into ranking their records. I would say, I can only say that I have definitively heard maybe 3 or 4 Kate Bush songs that I know for sure I've heard prior to doing this. There have been times where I've sort of thought about getting into her and I put on a record and I don't make it very far and turn it off. And so this was good to force myself all the way through all the studio records, but I guess we'll get into more about how I feel about each of them as we go through. Joe is sort of in a similar boat, although he's had more than just the past 2 weeks. He's got a few months on me as far as his experience with her.
I mean, if you'd asked me 2 months ago to name a Kate Bush song or album, I don't know if I would have been able to name a single one. And then about a month ago, I was reading an article, I think it was in Vulture or New Yorker or something, one of those magazines, about how the rapper Big Boy from Outkast was basically obsessed with Kate Bush and wanted her on his newest album. And I'm a pretty big fan of Big Boy, and when you hear stuff like that, you're like, okay, if he's like going to England to wait outside her concerts, because that's the only way to even get in touch with her. She must be, I mean, it's just such a blind spot in my entire like musical knowledge. And I don't know why. I blame America because we don't listen to Kate Bush. I blame my parents for not introducing them. I blame Listography. I blame you two for not telling me sooner about her.
That's BS. I'm shocked you even liked her. So I'd never even on my radar to be like, I bet Joe would really like Kate Bush, this bizarre, frantic goth surrealist. Like,
well, I guess I always thought Kate Bush because I knew the Peter Gabriel song "Don't Give Up." I guess I thought Kate Bush was like this 40s artist that kind of like got popular in England in the 80s or something again. I thought it was like a novelty thing. So I guess I just completely ignored her. And boy, was I wrong. Because I've spent, even before you even said to do the Kate Bush discography, I've been listening to all her albums basically nonstop when I'm not doing research for our list. So needless to say, I didn't need any kind of spurring to listen to Kate Bush, but I'm glad that we did this so that I could get a whole listography and really kind of explore the whole catalog.
I've known about her probably since the mid 2000s. I like her a lot, and some of her albums I love. I don't think she's in like my core favorite artists of all time, but she's really close. I like her more now, having listened to all of these, mainly just because it's so unique and impressive. But, you know, I knew pretty much everything through Sensual World up until doing this. So the 3 or 4 recent ones, or the more recent ones after Sensual World, I had listened to the first time this week. So that's where I was. But let's get into it, boys.
I just want to add, Joe was talking about blind spots. This might be one of my biggest blind spots left. I can't think of really many artists that are as big or bigger than Kate Bush that I really know nothing about. And I want to preface getting into my picks by like saying to take it easy on me, because I may say things that are like totally out of line or totally off base. I really have no idea how her fan base feels about most of these records, except the fact that I get the sense that Hounds of Love is generally considered the top or near the top. But other than that, I don't really know the general consensus on these. But we'll get into it. My number 9 is going to be The Dreaming. There's a noticeable shift on this record away from her sort of warm 70s production. You kind of get those really big kind of 80s sounding drums for the first time. There's a lot of sort of synth stuff happening on this record and a lot more experimentation. And I don't know, I just feel like on this record, she's getting a little too caught up in the experimentation, and the songs seem kind of unfocused and all over the place. I would also say generally about her sound and her singing, she's got sort of all these different voices that she goes into, almost like different characters. It's sort of that more operatic high voice that she does, and especially when she doubles the vocals in that voice, I don't care for it. She has another sort of high nasally voice that I like, but the more theaterish opera type high falsetto, I don't really like. It's probably most prevalent on this record, so that's what keeps it at the bottom for me. But yeah, The Dreaming, that's my least favorite at this juncture.
My bottom is going to be probably the only one of the 9 that I don't really like at all. I don't hate it. There is some good qualities to it, but not one. I'd rather just have the other 8, not one I would go back to. And that's going to be 50 Words for Snow. You know, I mean, there's some good sparse musical parts to this that I like. I like kind of the jazziness and misty. Wild Man's kind of cool. I like that Elton John's on it a little, on Snowden at Wheeler Street. But it's just kind of a weird concept to me, like just this winter album. It's like too Anne Murray for me. I don't get it. And you know, it's kind of, it doesn't have all of that lush experimentation with the sound, and, you know, just the product that comes out here it's just not what I want. And it's such a task to get through. These songs do not need to be this long, so long. No need for the lengths of, you know, 7-10 minute slow piano epics. And it just doesn't impress me very much. I think it really limits what she's capable of, which I don't think is a good move. So number 9, 50 Words for Snow.
Also, my number 9, I think I liked it a little bit more than Cramser did. You know, it doesn't have the experimentation. It's very kind of slow building, slow revealing, a little jazzy, a little just kind of, I don't know, it has a rich, big sound, but in kind of sparse instrumentation. And, you know, I guess it's a concept album about snow. There's some interesting characters that she sings about and kind of creates for this. I guess when I was listening to everything, I really kind of went in the whole story. I read about each album and like what she's singing about, because she has some, you know, her characters that she creates and sings through their point of view is always kind of rich and interesting. And, you know, Wild Man is about finding the Yeti and letting him go. Lake Tahoe's about like a water spirit looking for her dog. Misty's about having sex with a snowman. So there's some real interesting concepts here, but the music just doesn't grip you. It's kind of just too slow. You know, it's plain. It's very piano driven, which is fine. But compared to her other albums, I think this is probably the weakest musically, and that's why it's at the bottom for me.
My number 8 is going to be Ariel. So there's a long break between the Red Shoes and this one, 12 years, I believe. Her sort of last few records before that hiatus, she was getting a little poppier compared to her early work. This record seems to be a little bit of a move back towards the little bit of like art rock kind of progginess, but there's sort of a new agey sound to this that I really don't like very much at all. Sonically, it sounds good, it's mixed well, but it is just not for me. It makes me feel like I should be shopping for herbal supplements or something. It's I don't know. I don't like it at all.
Okay. Herbal supplements, interesting. I've got the Red Shoes at number 8, which I like a decent bit. She definitely tried a new approach here. It's got more of like a band feel to it. Like you can tell like the playing is a little bit more of the highlight here, especially compared to the other stuff. And a lot of the way that the songs play out, it has a little bit more predictable patterns. You know, there's the way she used to write the albums leading up to this was so unpredictable, and you could never really feel where the songs were going, and it always made you curious and interesting. And this one almost has like just a more of like, I guess you would say it's her more radio pop record in a way. She brings in a lot of friends to help out. Clapton is on the second song in the album. You got doesn't Prince shows up a little bit. So right off the bat, it has like this very modern sound to it for its time. It's almost got like, I think it came out in 92 or 93, but it has like this like pop mall feel, like 80s mall sound right off the bat with Rubber Band Girl. I don't like Eat the Music at all. I don't really dislike many of the songs on here, but it all just kind of feels a little bit tedious and uninspired, and maybe kind of like just doing not, you know, just not having a great idea for what she wanted this to be, and kind of maybe on this album more than anything else, maybe let some of her contemporary artists or, you know, other stuff going on in the pop scene kind of influence the sound of this album. But it's not bad. It just doesn't really do it for me. That a little bit too much. I'm always interested with the touches of the production on her albums, but this one is a little bit too conventional and kind of cheesy at times. And I actually don't really like Clapton's guitar work much on And So Is Love. So it's not bad, but it's not one of her best. And I don't think she's really playing to her strengths here on the Red Shoes.
Okay, my number 8 is Ariel. This is 2005, so like Jason said, it's 12 years after her last one, which is the Red Shoes. It is kind of a throwback to her, I don't know, maybe 80s work. It's 2 discs. The first one's sort of unconnected character songs. You have King of the Mountain, it's about Elvis. You got Pi, where she sings all the numbers of Pi, and it's actually pretty good. I was surprised at how much I liked her just singing numbers. She keeps it interesting. She sings about her son, washing clothes, Joan of Arc, kind of all over the place. And the songs are kind of hit or miss. I do like King of the Mountain a lot. And like I said, I could listen to her recite the phone book or 120 places of Pi. But I really like the second half, Sky of Honey. It's a little more, it's interesting. It has a lot of different ideas. There's a lot of sort of, bird song and stuff like that. And normally that isn't something I like, but I don't know, it just works for me. There's parts where she's just like laughing, but she just, I don't know, it has this kind of seductive, beguiling, pastoral, naturalistic quality to it. And I kind of dug it. The first half is definitely more conventional, but the second half is cool. And even though it's my number 8, I still like it a fair bit. Nobody else could have made something like this. So I think that definitely works in its favor.
All right, my number 7 is 50 Words for Snow. I pretty much agree with what you guys said about it. She kind of replaces that new agey sound on Ariel with kind of a bookstore jazz kind of sound. I do really like Elton John on Snowed In at Wheeler Street, but I think that's kind of almost highlights the problem with the record. When he comes in, it's like a breath of fresh air, like a different sound that's so desperately needed. I don't think if you're making a record that you want your guest star to be the highlight of your record. So it's a little boring. Songs are too long. I do like some of the concepts, and I think she could have done more with them. Yeah, for me, number 7, 50 Words for Snow.
All right. Number 7 for me is going to be The Dreaming. I like it a good bit. I like Sat in Your Lap. I think it's almost suffers from some of the similar problems from the Red Shoes for me. It's just got a little bit too much kind of, all of her stuff is odd. I guess some of the choices she makes with some of the sounds on this are a little odd. Some of the keyboards sound really bad, a bit too goofy, almost like low budget, like a child's like Casio keyboard or something that you would just run with a couple AA batteries. It just sounds really lame to me at times. I do kind of like how it's like a bit more upbeat and has like this disjointed like dream circus style to it with All the Love and Leave It Open, kind of have that. And I'm always in love with her vocals. I disagree with anything Jason has bad to say about them. I think that they're always tremendous and always such a variety. But on this album, they are recorded and sound a bit too tinny, and it doesn't really bring out the best highlights and the best range in her voice. It can be a little piercing at times and just a little, makes everything sound really kind of wiry and flat compared to how her other stuff is when you really get that nice theater opera version. But it's still got, I think Pull Out the Pen is pretty good. I like Sat in Your Lap, like I said. I like Houdini. So nothing too bad to, dismiss, just not quite as good. And like I said, kind of suffers the same stuff as the Red Shoes. So number 7, The Dreaming.
Interesting. Very, very, very interesting. The fan base of Kate Bush will not be happy with either of you for that. But For me, my number 7 is going to be The Red Shoes. It definitely kind of is the most tethered to maybe a certain era because it definitely has that 90s, 80, late 80s kind of sound to it. The production is, you can almost tell exactly, it came out in 93, but it sounds like it probably came out in like 90. It has that real kind of, sound. And it has some cool songs on it. I'm with Kramzer. I don't think Clapton adds anything to And So Is Love. I think once you hear that it's Clapton, it kind of takes you out of the whole song. It's like, this is too Clapton. Like he's just kind of taking it over. It's too obvious that it's him. And I kind of feel the same way about Why Should I Love You, which is the Prince collaboration. I don't know. You'd think Prince and Kate Bush would be just money in the bank, but just it doesn't quite work. Jeff Beck is on You're the One. And again, it just doesn't add anything to it. I think Kate Bush can stand on her own. Constellation of the Heart sounds like a Prince song, but it's just Kate Bush, and it's one of the better songs on here. Rubber Band Girl is cool. I like Eat the Music. It has kind of a calypso beat. I think Kramzer hit it when he said she didn't really have a focus, an idea for this one. It was kind of just like, here's some songs, maybe play to the pop sensibilities, play to the time. It just comes off a little bit unfocused, but there's still plenty of good stuff on here. I'm probably saying too many negative things because it's a pretty darn good album. It just doesn't quite have the magic, I think, of some of her previous releases.
Okay, my number 6 is going to be Never Forever. This is her 3rd record. And I was reading a little bit about it. It seemed like this was the first record that she felt was really strong. I don't think she likes her first 2 records all that much. She got a little more artistic control over this one. It's okay. I don't love it. I don't find most of it very engaging. It's a very dense record. There's a lot of different ideas and different sounds happening, but I just find it to be kind of light on the hooks. Not a lot that draws me in. The only song that I really like that much is Wedding List. Even though I think she's, taking the reins a little, I don't know that it's necessarily as focused as it should be.
You don't like Babooshka?
No.
I feel like that's a good barometer for if someone's going to like Kate Bush or not. So, all right. Number 6 for me is going to be Lionheart. I don't really have anything bad to say about this. Its biggest problem is it's not the Kick Inside. It's kind of just like Kick Inside diet version. Everything is quite similar, just not quite as good. Came out same time, essentially, or the same year. And, we've talked about albums that kind of fall into that problem where there's, I think we talked about that with Springsteen when, there's a couple year period when an artist is writing songs and they've got 20 and they put 10 good ones on one and 10 decent ones on the other. And, I kind of feel that way about Lionheart a little bit. But there's definitely some really good songs. And I love, kind of the style and the whimsical kind of fairy tale, childlike nature of her first few albums, with In Search of Peter Pan and Oh England, My Lionheart. There's also some surprising nice rock here, like on Full House. But I think it's not quite as flushed out as the first record, especially like some of the songs just feel like needed a little bit more time to develop or a little bit more time in the studio. But there's definitely, really, really good stuff on here. And, I love these first couple records because her vocals are just really running the show. And it's almost like there's an entire cast to this play that is the album. And she's doing all of the parts, like in her bedroom, just like acting it out in front of a mirror. That's kind of how I get the impression of her. But, it's a really good album. It's just not as good as the Kick Inside, and it's not as good as other ones as well. So number 6, Lionheart.
You nailed it, Kramzer. At number 6, I also have Lionheart. Kate Bush doesn't like it. The critics didn't really like it. It was kind of rushed after the Kick Inside. A lot of the songs were already written. This was, her first 2 albums. She had signed to the label when she was like 13, and they kind of just let her learn and do stuff. And I forget how long, 3 years later, she came out with The Kick Inside. Same year, she comes out with Lionheart. And it's very similar to Kick Inside. I think probably the best songs at least the majority of them got put on the Kickin' side. But there's some really good stuff here. Symphony in Blue, wow. Coffee Home Ground is kind of like that insane style that she's so good at, very theatrical storytelling. Her voice really, Jason doesn't like the voice. I love the modulations and the highs and the lows and the way she uses her voice. I think it's her best weapon. One of the, I can just listen to her voice. I think she's definitely has one of my favorite voices of all time. I love what she does on Hammer Horror with it. Just really kind of plays into the song. That's probably my favorite song on the album. You hear the song and you hear the different parts and the vocals all over the place. There's a kind of cool heavy guitar in the background. And then you read about what it's about. And it just all kind of comes together, and I keep listening to it over and over and over. And it's just, I don't know, every time I listen, it reveals something new. It grows on me in a different way. And, I think that's what makes Kate Bush great. And I think this is a very good album. And I think it's wildly underrated. It's just kind of, in comparison to the Kickin' side, it's probably just not quite as good. But I think it's a fine piece of work by an 18-year-old who was also doing co-producing on these two first albums. So it's some of the, you think about a young artist and they're going to be under the control of the label and the producer and everything else. But even on these first albums, you can really kind of see and feel and hear what Kate Bush wants us to hear. And I think that's pretty amazing that she was able to have that control right off the bat.
All right, at number 5, I have The Red Shoes. It hasn't aged very well, like you guys said. This is the one that sounds the most dated out of all of her records. It's kind of like a watered down version of the 2 records that came before it. I do like a couple tracks here. Lily, You're the One, I think is pretty cool. So I think I have it at number 5 because I think even though it maybe hasn't aged the greatest and, it's not as good as some of her prior records, it's still kind of a pop record. And for me, it's a little easier to digest, a little more listenable than something like Ariel or 50 Words for Snow. That's why I have it at number 5.
Joe was just talking about how every time he listens to Lionheart, it kind of grows on him more or reveals something that he missed the first time. And I think that's a good lesson for pretty much all of her records. It's not something that you just throw on in the background. This album for me was originally on my first draft around number 8, and it's climbed up to number 5 now. And it's probably premature to do this list now because I feel like if I listen to it a few more times, it's going to go even higher. And that's Ariel. I think she is at her best when she is kind of doing that art pop kind of thing that maybe only Peter Gabriel does better in the mid 80s. But and at first when I started listening to Ariel, I thought this was kind of just like a little bit of a boring, stripped down kind of just singer-songwriter album, especially, some of the songs have just kind of a more ordinary subject matter. It doesn't have those supernatural, surreal things that she used to have a lot of, and then it's sort of become something else. So I think it is very much an art pop, a return to that art pop sort of style. But it took me a while because I do think it's still way too sluggish of a start with King of the Mountain and Pie and Birdie. It doesn't really get you going. But there's some really good songs on it. How to Be Invisible. I like Joanne. Coral Room is great. Somewhere in Between on Architect's Dream is really good. Joe's right. The second half, the Sky of Honey side of it is much better than the first one. And this album just kind of perplexes me still. And I'm just really fascinated by it. I don't think I understand what it's really about, but I am just like enthralled with it. And I think if we did this again, if we remastered this one in a month, I might have it at 4 or maybe even 3, but because it really just grew on me a lot. It's the one that I listened to the most. Something like underlying just fascination I have with it. And I think it's going to keep growing. And I know that it got a lot of really good critical acclaim when it came out, and I can see why. It's pretty fascinating. So number 5 for me is Ariel.
I admit myself, I didn't listen to the newest ones as much as probably is required to get them. They're not as obvious as her early work. They definitely require a little more listening. So I think Kramser's right. If given more time, this order might be a little different. For me, my number 5 is going to be the Sensual World. It's definitely her most kind of grounded in reality. There's not that kind of fantastic kind of spacey, spiritually kind of work that she was kind of dabbling in. On her first 5 records, it's definitely rooted in kind of real love. This woman's work was actually the only song I knew by Kate Bush, and I only knew the Maxwell cover that he does. I've loved that song for a long time, and for some reason I never was like, hey, I should listen to the real version and then see who that is all about. So I guess my bad on that. That's a fantastic song. Love and Anger and Rocket's Tail, which David Gilmour makes an appearance on. I think, unlike the guest guitar work on The Red Shoes, I think Gilmour kind of fits better with what she's going for. He doesn't overwhelm. With Clapton, you know it's Clapton the first 3 notes that he plays. And, you know, there's some cool stuff. Heads Were Dancing is about, I think it's about like dancing with Hitler, before, but not knowing that it's Hitler. It's this kind of, it's one of those Kate Bush songs you really kind of have to read about and kind of know to really get the full story. And then you listen to it and it's just kind of an entirely new song. So it's a very cool album, but I like, it's missing that sort of, you know, the high-low, the theatrical vocals, the operatic, the weirdness that she really kind of found on her 80s work. It's definitely her most kind of pop, kind of grounded album, which is great. It's a great album, but I like her earlier work a little bit more. So it's in number 5 for me. The Sensual World.
Ooh, I like the way you say that.
That's the way Kate Bush says it, so I'm just going off her. She's my muse.
My number 4 is Lionheart. She's got the same producer from her first record, Andrew Powell. It's very similar to Kick Inside, and after the Kick Inside was kind of a hit, the record label kind of pushed her to put this out quickly. So a lot of the songs were written prior to the Kick Inside when she was a teenager. I don't think she was happy about having to rush it, and I don't think she was totally satisfied with the outcome of this record. My favorite thing about this record is the sound of it. The production on it's nice. I like the sound of the first 2 records a good bit. It's got that warm 70s sounding production with kind of like the deader toms and kind of pillowy sounding drums. That's sort of my favorite production style. The bass sound on this record is really good, but I still just don't like the songs that much. Symphony and Blues probably the only one I like on this record. But yeah, number 4, Lionheart.
My number 4, and I'm going to say 4, 3, 2, and 1 are the Kate Bush albums that I think are, you know, stand on their own as great albums in the history of music. I'm going with Never Forever. It's the first album that she really starts to explore that sound that I think she will master right around this time, a little bit after. You know, she's starting to get the drum machines in, a lot of more string arrangements, synthesizers. And if you think like, you know, it's a little more piano forward, and the first 2 albums have kind of like this big like live theater feel. Now all of a sudden it's really cinematic and everything kind of builds and has these really dramatic climaxes. So, you know, the style and the nature of her art is here, but the sound is different, and the styles of the songs are kind of just wildly random, which is really cool, I think. I love Babooshka. You know, All We Ever Look For is this kind of really cool, playful, toy-like nature to it. Violin is kind of like rockin' and heavy. Army Dreamers is a nice little waltz dance kind of song, and Egypt is really unique and fascinating. It's just got this really unique vision, even though I think a little bit of the macabre is gone a little bit compared to the first 2 ones, but it's still there. Like The Infant Kiss is about, you know, an older woman falling in love with a really young man who has the spirit of an old man. And, you know, so she still has like those supernatural, like dreamlike elements to what she's singing about. And I think the songs on this are really good. Like we said before, Babooshka is just a great, you know, metric to if you like her sound or not. And I think she's like just perfecting it on this album. It's starting to all really come together. Songwriting's great, sounds really good. Nothing really to complain about it. Never Forever, number 4.
Well, Cramsey, you keep stealing my thunder, because also my number 4, Never Forever, and I think you pretty much just nailed kind of, you know, what it's all about. This is her first album of original material that she wrote kind of in the now. You know, the other stuff on Kick Inside and Lionheart, a lot of it had been written between, 13 and 18 when she was recording them. So this is kind of her spreading her wings and getting into what she considers her sound. The first one with drum machines, so it does have that 80s sound. First one with synthesizers. She started using the Fairlight CMI, which kind of was the synth du jour for the art rock crowd. Peter Gabriel used it a lot. She would use it even more on the Dreaming and Hounds of Love. But it still kind of has, there's still that gothic kind of feel that you get from songs like Wuthering Heights on the Kick Inside. She kind of continues that with The Infant Kiss. But Babooshka is kind of like a really kind of 80s synthy song. Violin is kind of this, heavy rocking song. It's kind of her just showing that she can do whatever. There's no kind of consistency in style here. It's all over the place, but I think she kind of nails all of it. Army Dreamers doesn't have any drums at all. It's this kind of waltz anti-war tune. Breathing is about a fetus kind of deciding whether or not to be born into like an apocalyptic world. Her subject matter is just so kind of all over the place. Her musical style is all over the place, but it's all kind of rooted in her mastery of her voice and what she wants to do. And I think it all sounds pretty amazing. It's pretty incredible for, I think she was 20 or 21 on this one, that she's able to produce this and kind of create what she wanted to create. There's no like outside influence. It's just pretty much just Kate Bush doing what she wants, and it's just so impressive to me.
It is kind of crazy how such a young, weird, like artist just, credit to whoever was, her managers or, the producers or whoever were just like, yeah, do whatever you want. You don't really see that too often, but thank God they did.
No, and it was the first solo album written by a female to top the UK album charts. It's sort of in rarefied air. She kind of, it barely, I don't think it made a dent in America, but in Britain, she was, a trailblazer.
Look at the look in Joe's eye when he talks about Kate Bush. Wow. Oh my goodness. Smitten, totally bugging. Wow.
All right. My number 3 is the Kick Inside. This is my favorite sounding Kate Bush record. I think the recording is really good. It's got that very warm 70s production again. The thing that surprised me most about this record, heading into her discography, knowing very, very little about her, it was a lot proggier than I expected it to be. I thought it was a pretty promising debut. I like the saxophone song, Ode to Be in Love. L'Amour Looks like Something Like You. Unfortunately, with each subsequent release after this, until you get to the 2 records that I still have ahead of it, she kept going further and further away from the things I liked about this record.
All right, my number 3 is going to be the Sensual World. I really like this album a lot. It's a nice blend of the, a more popular 80s sound, and it's tailored really nice to the songs that she's written here. It's a little bit more straightforward than with the songwriting than, what she had done previously, but it's really good. I don't have a whole lot to say that you guys didn't already touch on, other than the only problem I have with this album is that it's front loaded for me. I think the first 5 are 5 of the best 6 tracks on it. This woman's work being the closer and the exception on the back half. So it's a little lopsided, but it's not necessarily a terrible thing because the back half isn't bad. I just think the first half is incredible with Sensual World, Love and Anger, The Fog, Reaching Out. They're all really awesome. I also love some of the playing on this. The bass sounds really good in this album. It's just exceptional. And I'm not positive about this, but I think this one is kind of like there's a division on this among Kate Bush fans, whether they like it that much or not, but I kind of think it's a no-brainer in the top 3. I think she sounds great. She's not quite as, you're just talking about more proggier stuff. That one's kind of abandoned a little bit, and, she's not utilizing her entire vocal range as much on these later albums, but what she is offering is really nice, and she's still among one of the best singers at the time. So
all right, well, here is where we diverge, because at number 3 I got Hounds of Love, which critically it's her best. The critics just adore it, and I think it's a fantastic album. The first half, especially so-called Hounds of Love side. Running Up That Hill, Hounds of Love, Big Sky, Mother stands for Comfort, Cloud Busting. It's definitely, this album came after The Dreaming, which was super experimental, super all over the place. Totally flopped for a Kate Bush album. So she kind of went back and said, okay, I'll take some of the edges off. And this is definitely kind of, if you don't love that sort of theatrical, shrill, all over the placeness of her vocals, this is definitely probably where you'll find the Kate Bush that you like. It's got a lot of drum machines, more conventional singing. It's not like an easy listen. It's not, completely conventional, but it compared to her other stuff, it is sort of the most normal sounding until you get to the ninth wave, which is side 2, which is sort of a conceptual side, sort of like the second side of Ariel, about floating alone, lost at sea. So a lot of kind of weird voices and paranoid kind of sounds, and it's definitely cool. I think I don't love it as much as most people. I don't think it's quite as sonically interesting as some of the weird stuff she does on The Dreaming. So that's why it's behind that. But it's still fantastic. Definitely her biggest kind of 80s pop kind of anthems in Cloud Busting and Running Up That Hill, Hounds of Love. But I'm missing that kind of insanity that the Kick Inside and The Dreaming have. That is why it is my number 3.
Hounds of Love is my number 2. Things just kind of click for her on this record. She stops doing that voice that I don't really like. Her voice comes down into sort of a deeper kind of pop voice. She's projecting a bit more. The songs are more structured. They're more melodic. I think the production matches the songs better. And yeah, I think it's a pretty strong record, especially the front half. I don't like the second half as much. I think the first 3 tracks on the record are 3 of her best songs in her catalog, but I think the record that I have ahead of it is a more consistent listen the whole way through.
My number 2 is The Kick Inside, an amazing debut. Jason was saying it's got that warm 70s feel to it, but then like her voice comes in like this gothic angel that's just pure controlled chaos and is really delicate and powerful at the same time. This album's just like kind of like a big dream sequence where she's like guiding you through it, and it's got a really cool fantastical fairy tale element to it, and it's very childlike, and the melodies are so unpredictable and unique. There's nothing else really like it. The one song I don't really care for much on it is Kite, but everything else I think is among some of her best work. I like how probably the most traditional or, like sounding song of the time is probably James and the Cold Gun. Moving is great. Saxophone song is great. They're all awesome. Wuthering Heights, is just a great representation of what she likes to sing about. She's always using literary influences and, even horror films and all of this stuff. And it just is a big whirlwind of imagination, which is great because her youth brings that out. She doesn't have a matured self to write albums about. So she's got to kind of have this wonder about her music, and it's all over the place here. And the vocals are just fantastic. It's really hard to find a better vocal album than this one. So it is a really strong number 2. Was up for consideration for one of my nominees in 1978. I just couldn't make it, but I do think it's a great album.
Yep, it is. That is also my number 2. I've been obsessed with this album for a while, especially Wuthering Heights, which just blew me away. I can't believe I missed that song. Like, how on earth, how have I never heard that song before? It's the first number 1 song ever written and performed by a female to reach number 1 on the UK charts. It's just got this incredible gothic feel. The chords, I don't know, there's something about it. The first time I heard it, I just couldn't stop listening to it. And I went on Reddit and looked at what makes this song great and the chord changes, and I was trying to find like why is this song so unique, and I don't know, I couldn't figure it out, but it's just a gorgeous kind of gothic spirits kind of ballad. It has a great guitar solo at the end. Her super soprano, I guess, vocals just they're up to here, they're as high as they can go. It's just nothing I'd ever heard before. And the rest of the album, there's this, for how young she was, she's very kind of sensual and sexual with her wordplay. She's kind of sounds like Minnie Riperton at times on this, which I think is cool. The saxophone song is like a direct descendant of Carole King's Jazz Man, but with the focus not on the jazz man, but on how she feels watching this guy play saxophone, which I think is a really cool and mature kind of way to change things up. So I'm just totally struck by how mature and how different of a songwriter she is, even at 18, 17, 16, whenever she wrote some of these songs. I love the literary influences. I really do like the 70s production, like Jason said. I think it's probably her best sounding album. I love the piano, how it takes precedence. And it's just completely unique. I had to kick Bruce Springsteen off my 78 list to put this on. And I wish I could redo some other of the lists because there'd probably be some other changes. But I don't know. It's kind of changed my life listening to this album. So, and yet it's not number one. So I guess I'll have some nice things to say about the eventual champion as well.
All right. My number one is The Sensual World. I think it's her most focused songwriting. I think it's the most cohesive record. Like Joe said when he was talking about it, it's the most grounded in reality and the sort of least fantastic of her records, which is more to my taste and what I'm looking for in pop and rock music. I love Love and Anger, Reaching Out, Deeper Understanding is really cool. This woman's work. Love and Anger was one of the few songs that I knew of hers before starting this whole adventure. I had the Not a Surf record where they do a bunch of covers and they do this song. And unlike Joe, when he heard This Woman's Work by Maxwell, I went back and listened to her version and I liked it. And then I tried to listen to more of her stuff and then I couldn't get into it. So, but that song's always been a favorite of mine. I think the whole record's really good. Probably the easiest for me to listen to start to finish. So that's why it's number one.
All right. My number one, can't believe I'll be the only one with this at one, is going to be Hounds of Love, which I think is a runaway champion. It will be a very strong contender for my 1985 album of the year. You guys touched on it already, and you're right about everything. It's just more impressive than you're leading on. It's got all those great pop dancey drum beats and a bit more of a conventional formula, but her flavor is all over it, no doubt. Really cutting edge production. Like I said, I think this kind of art pop sound is, Peter Gabriel and Kate Bush really are the masters of it during this time. And then there's also, a lot of songs on it that don't have drums and just kind of have, that more sparse just atmosphere to it, which is really nice. The bass on Mother Stands for Comfort is great. It's just got this big, the whole album's just like this big whimsical gothic, fever pitch. It's like it's coming to you in a dream, and it makes you it's almost got a nervousness to it, but a beautiful nervousness where you feel like you're under a lot of pressure taking on the characters of these songs, and you're in these big journeys within song to song, and it's just gorgeous. I love some of the cinematic nature of it, with Waking the Witch. Morning Fog is great. This is a 5 out of 5 star for me, a classic, a must own. So an easy number one, Hounds of Love.
Well, speaking of dreams, my number one is The Dreaming. I don't know what you guys were thinking rating it so low. It's definitely not her kind of easiest, most obvious work. It's definitely a demanding listen. The first couple of times I heard it, I didn't think much of it. I thought it was probably going to be somewhere in the bottom of her list. But then I listened some more, and I probably listened to it, 15 times in the past couple weeks. And every time it reveals something new. Like I was saying on the Lionheart, where, I think the best thing about Kate Bush is how every listen reveals something new and different and kind of unique. This one in particular, just the arrangements and the weirdness of it. This is her first one that she produced completely by herself. So it's, more than any other before, this is her album. The label almost returned it because they didn't like it. It didn't do well in the charts, but Bjork and Big Boy like it the best. So that's good enough for me. I love Sat in Your Lap. Probably one of my favorite songs of hers. She's just all over the place. She's all these voices kind of coming in, the shrill kind of yelling, but also it's super poppy, super catchy. There's more synth, there's more drum machines. It leaves behind the 70s production on most of the stuff. But then there's a track like Houdini, which is almost not even a song. It's sort of like snippets pieced together. She does this ridiculous emo almost death metal scream on it. She's trying all these things. I think they all just are really cool sounding. It's the most unique, I think, of all her records. You know, Get Out of My House is about The Shining. Houdini is about Houdini. The Dreaming is about Aborigines. Suspended in Gaffa is about like seeing God. Pull Out the Pin is from the viewpoint of a Vietnamese soldier fighting Americans in Vietnam. There Goes a Tenor, which is sort of like Genesis-esque prog, but in a, you know, kind of a pop suit. You know, she has these different voices that she does, and it's so wild and ridiculous and crazy and just all over the place. But I love it. I can't get enough of it. The weirdness. Normally, I don't like this kind of music where it's almost the songs get overtaken by the concept, but for some reason, maybe because it's just Kate Bush and she does it better than anyone else, I can't get enough of listening to this album. I don't know. It's just every time I listen, something new, something cool, just the layers of vocals, the instrumentation, it's just perfect. You know, in my mind.
It is cool because she's such a challenging artist. And I think the thing that, especially like with what you're doing right now as a new fan, is like it piques your interest so much because you've got no other equivalent or nothing else to fall back on and be like, you know, your ears aren't trained for Kate Bush because she stands on her own to me so much. Like nothing else sounds like Kate Bush at all.
I'm still waiting for like something to unlock and like for my ears to figure it out. I don't know. The problem is I'm not that intrigued, and I don't know how much I'll go back to it for that to actually end up happening. I do legitimately like Hounds of Love and Sensual World, but beyond that, I feel like one of these people that say they don't like Dylan's voice or something. Like what? Yeah.
Like me. So I guess this is sort of this is Kate Bush is your Dylan, and Dylan is my Kate Bush. We can't wrap our heads around it, but I don't know. I read all this stuff about how influential and important she was as an artist, and really just makes me like her more. I mean, she's probably the most important female artist in, you know, pop and rock history. Just all the things she did, the way she took control. She didn't let the labels typecast her or stereotype her. And it's just really cool to see an artist like that just give a big middle finger to the labels and everyone else and just do what she wanted to do and still be popular. And I guess in Britain, she's sort of a living legend. And somehow I just completely miss that here. I guess it's this damn American whatever that just you don't get, you know, her importance living over here. And I'm sorry I missed out on 35 years of my life without Kate Bush.
Before we close out, just want to reiterate, my list especially is not anything set in stone. You should take my list as just sort of like a reaction video, first impression. I'm sure if I listened to these more, it would change a lot. So yeah, thanks for watching, everybody. Hit like, leave a comment below with your lists. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Hit the bell so you get notifications. And we will see you tomorrow with our top 10 Kate Bush songs.